This program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with Eau Claire County. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9.
I'd like to call to order the December 5th meeting of the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors. And I will tell you, I'm up here this evening because our chair, Greg Moore, is in Chicago. And his mom has had some issues, and so he's staying to be sure that that progress continues. And apparently she's doing somewhat better, but he didn't feel comfortable leaving. So we wish him and his family well, to say the least. We'll open our meeting as we usually do, honoring the flag, and with a moment of reflection by Supervisor Nick Snyder. Join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For the reflection tonight, I selected a quote from Thurgood Marshall from his speech upon the receipt of the Liberty Medal in 1992. We cannot play ostrich. Democracy just cannot flourish amid fear. Liberty cannot bloom amid hate. Justice cannot take root amid rage. America must get to work. In the chill climate in which we live, we must go against the prevailing wind. We must dissent from the indifference. We must dissent from the apathy. We must dissent from the fear, the hatred, and the mistrust. We must dissent from a nation that has buried its head in the sand, waiting in vain for the need of its poor, its elderly, and its sick to disappear and just blow away. We must dissent from a government that has left its young without jobs, education, or hope. We must dissent from the poverty of vision and the absence of moral leadership. We must dissent because America can do better, because America has no choice but to do better.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Meyer. And now would you please use your keypads to register your attendance. And your attendance has been registered. We have a quorum present. Our first item of action is the approval of the journal of proceedings from the November 7th meeting. They were included in your packet. And I would look for a motion to approve from Robert Leary and seconded by David Morgan. Are there any corrections, additions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor of approval of the minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries and the minutes are approved as presented. We now have a time for public comment. I do not have a list of anyone wishing to speak to the board. And so is there anyone wishing to address the board that we have missed? Seeing none, we will move on. This evening there are no reports to the county board under item 6. So we'll move on to the presentation of petitions, claims, and communications. And I believe that our supervisor, Pat Lavelle, has something he wants to share with the board.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I happened to be in Madison this weekend to see my granddaughters, and on the way home I stopped and saw Supervisor Woollett at his new residence in Middleton Glen, Middleton, Wisconsin. Bruce was very, very, very happy to see me. I think he's lonely down there. He misses the county board and he misses all the running around he used to do. He's kind of cooped up in the place he's at. So he told me about 6 times to wish everybody happy holidays. And like I said, he's lonely down there. Him and his wife, they don't get out much. It's pretty hectic to travel down there. He's used to driving around here. So I got his phone number and his address, so if anybody would like to get it after the meeting, like to stop, I can give him his phone number. He sure would like to hear from you people, so if you, if you'd like to give him a call or drop him a line, or if you get into Madison, it's pretty easy to find. It's right off the Beltline in Middleton, so. He said, like I said, he told me about 4 or 5 times to mention it to the board.
I thank you so much for that information, and again, if you're wishing to send in the season's greeting, contact Pat after the meeting, please. And now we have the first reading of ordinances by committees.
File number 68. This ordinance makes changes to the Eau Claire County Code in Title 16, Public Lands and Forests, as part of the strategic plan process.
Refer that particular file to our next meeting.
File number 70, to amend section 3.20.010E of the code, benefits of elected officials.
And that file also will be referred to our next meeting.
File 75. This ordinance makes changes to the Eau Claire County Code in Title II, Administration, and Title IX, Public Peace and Morals and Welfare, to address legal citations, footnotes, and typos per the strategic plan process.
We'll look to see that at the next meeting.
File 85, to repeal section 3.85.005A of the code, definitions, and to repeal section 3.85.015C of the code, qualifications.
Refer to the next meeting.
File number 91, this ordinance makes changes to the Eau Claire County Code in Title II, Administration, per the strategic plan process.
And please also refer that to the next meeting. I do not have any first readings of ordinances submitted by members, so we'll go on to the reports of standing committees and commissions and boards. And the first is the Committee on Administration. Please.
File number 74 is ratifying a 5-year agreement between Eau Claire County and Chippewa counties, authorizing the county board chair and the county clerk to execute the agreement on behalf of Eau Claire County.
And I would look for a motion from Supervisor Beckfield, seconded by Supervisor Gatlin, and an explanation by Supervisor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
You're on.
As you will all know, the Chippewa Valley Regional Airport is run via a contract with Eau Claire County, and it's a 5-year contract which will expire at the end of 18. And so this contract that we are looking at, or this agreement that we're looking at tonight, goes from 2019 until 2023. It provides for a slight increase, and by slight I mean 1% increase in 2021, and then an additional 1% increase in 2023. Otherwise, it is status quo until 2021. I would like to point out, I think we sometimes take the airport for granted. It is a very viable and important resource in this Chippewa Valley. You look at the commercial flights, you look at the private and corporate flights that are there. It's a very busy airport. And I think a lot of times we have a tendency to just look at those flights that United has in and out, but it's very, very active. And not only that, with a survey that was taken a couple of years ago, Chippewa Valley Regional Airport has a much lower expense ratio than the other airports of similar size, not only in the state, but in the country. And I think they are to be thanked for being as fiscally responsible as they are. It's important that we approve this agreement so that there isn't any gap between the one that we have now and the new one. 2019. Thank you.
And thank you for that explanation. Are there any questions? Seeing none, it looks like we're ready for the vote. For all in favor of this particular motion to ratify the 5-year agreement, please take your keypads, in fact, take your keypads, period, and register your vote. And that passes 26-3. We'll move on to the next file, and that's the
File 76, approving alterations of supervisory district boundaries resulting from new wards for the city of Eau Claire.
And I would look for a motion by Supervisor Miller, seconded by Supervisor Wilkie. And explanation again back to Supervisor Clark.
This resolution is necessary due to the city of Eau Claire creating 2 new wards, voting wards. City wards 71 and 72, which are the new wards, will be incorporated into the county board supervisory districts. Ward 71 will be placed in supervisory district 12, and ward 72 will be placed in supervisory ward 17, or supervisory district 17. There's no fiscal impact, it's just simply changing our maps.
Thank you. Supervisor DeLuca, your light went on briefly. Did you wish to speak to this?
I was on the last one, so.
Thank you. I'm sorry if I missed you. Are there any questions at all in regard to this? Seeing none, then I would look for you to use your keypads to vote on file 076 approving the alteration of the supervisory district boundaries. And that's a unanimous decision by the board, and the motion passes. Then we go on to the Committee on Human Resources. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm already trying to hurry us along, apparently. Now we'll move on to file 18078.
Moving the 2018 annual meeting on budget from November 13th, 2018 to November 7th, 2018.
A motion, please. Supervisor Smyer, seconded by Supervisor Lavelle. And explanation by Supervisor Clark.
This is pretty self-explanatory. We have legal documents that are due to the State of Wisconsin Department of Revenue on November 15th. And in order to give staff the time to get everything compiled and forwarded, we need a couple more days. And so we're moving from the 13th to November 7th. There's an election on November 6th, so therefore the meeting will be on Wednesday the 7th. Thank you.
Thank you for that explanation. Are there any questions in regard to this motion? Seeing none, please use... Oh, I'm sorry. Jim Dunning, I missed your hand. Supervisor Dunning.
Does that include since this is the budget meeting, does it include the Thursday then following?
I would assume that would be the case, because we've always had it so that if we're not finished with our business, that business is carried over to the next day.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, please use your keypad to register your vote. And Supervisor Henning? Thank you. And that passes unanimously. So now we will move on to the Committee of Human Resources and file 1718083.
Amending the Eau Claire County Human Resources Employee Policy Manual.
An explanation by the Chair of Human Resources. Oh, excuse me, we gotta get the motion first. A motion for it, please. Supervisor Frank, I'm going to give you the motion to approve, and Supervisor Mortimer for the second. And explanation by Supervisor Clark.
Thank you. This is a policy change in the employee manual, and as we all know, whenever there is a fiscal item that comes before the HR board, as it refers to the employee manual, that will come to the county board. The committee voted to make the change for human services due to the combination of juvenile intake and human services now working together. It became apparent that we needed to do something for the on-call time for the juvenile intake people as well as for the rest of human services. The program has changed pretty dramatically over the last few years, and this is necessary in order to fairly compensate people who spend their weeknights, their weekends, and their holidays on call. The amounts are listed in your fact sheet, and it will mean a fiscal liability of $14,125, which will be taken care of through the current, or through the human services budget. And if anybody has any questions, which I may not be able to answer, and there probably are quite a few tonight, Diane Cable is here, and I'm sure would be happy to answer.
And thank you for that explanation. And are there any questions? Looks like we have Heather DeLuca, Supervisor DeLuca.
Thank you. I just was wondering, we just finished with our budget requests and things like that. Is this something that could not have come to us during the budget procedure?
Would you like to?
Actually, it is incorporated, the numbers are incorporated into the budget. This is simply making the policy consistent with what is in the budget.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And Supervisor Stelges, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking at the resolution, it says that this is a change to the current on-call pay structure. Can someone describe what the current on-call pay structure is?
And I think we'll call on our Director of Human Services, Diane Cable, to give an explanation for that. Maybe you can find a microphone near you there, or you can come up to the front here if you wish.
The current process for on-call, which includes just a couple of juvenile intake workers, is they get compensation for carrying the phone. And that's all for compensation. And then they receive overtime if they, or comp time, excuse me, if they go out. So this is more in line with our other counties, this structure for compensation of this additional work.
And I have Supervisor Penny had his hand up, but I don't see your light on.
I posted, but I didn't work.
Okay.
Is that uniform with the other ones in the county for other departments in the county?
So Human Resources did that assessment and evaluation. They, in terms of, there is compensation, I understand, for the other counties who do on-call through the Sheriff's Department, yes, and through Highway, yes.
But
and it's a comparison then in terms of this kind of work to other counties also.
But is it not the same as like Highway or Sheriff's?
So I can't speak to if the exact amounts are the same, but it's in alignment with the same kind of structure. So I can't tell you if it's the exact amounts, but it is comparable.
Thank you.
And Supervisor Leary, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question had to do with regard to the way this was put together in the sense that it refers to policy attached and information that's been provided, which unfortunately wasn't provided as part of our agenda. I'm sure it was part of the committee's agenda. So are you saying then with this revised policy that the individuals will be receiving less pay, more pay? That's really what I'd like to know. And second of all, is this going to be affecting any incumbent positions, or is this just for new positions?
So this will allow for compensation, which is a new pay for, and is different than what is the current policy. So right now, individuals receive compensation for carrying the phone. And then they receive comp time if they are called out. And this policy will reflect then for them to receive compensation if they have engagement in any calls or call-outs.
Which will be the time to carry the phone and be on call and be available if needed.
Correct. They'll have they will get still the compensation for carrying the phone, and then compensated if they are engaged in responding to a call. Yes.
And will this increase our costs or decrease our costs?
So we are going to be tracking that very close. So we have currently the current Children's Court Services has some dollars to be able to carry us through the rest of this year in their current budget. And then we budgeted for this for 2018, and this is dependent upon the kind of calls and what actions have to take place. So we base this off of an analysis of the past few years.
So do you think it'll be more or less? I mean, you must have an estimate. I mean,
more or less than, right now it will be, the compensation will be more than what it was in the past because they were not receiving that compensation.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Supervisor Stouches, please.
Yeah, so just a little bit more clarification. People will still be paid for carrying a phone, but they will no longer be given the comp time if they're called out.
They will be receiving pay instead of comp time.
Okay, so this basically replaces the comp time plan.
Correct, because they weren't receiving any pay for that. The compensation was through comp time, in which was affecting at times people needing to take time off and not being available for sometimes work.
So the comp time will not be in effect anymore.
No,
Comp time. Go ahead.
So people will still have an eligibility to be able to receive comp time, but they also could be receiving pay. So for
but they won't get both.
Correct.
It's
Will
either
not get both. It's either or. Yes.
Okay.
Is there anyone else that has a question on this issue? I'm not seeing anyone. Oh, excuse me. Supervisor Miller.
It's not a question so much as just a slight point of clarification. The juvenile intake system always had intake workers on call, but there was usually only like 2 individuals available throughout a weekend period or in the evening. Now with the blending of these 2 departments, we're going to have more individuals trained to do this, and it expands the availability of the number of people who can respond to the on-call. That's why we, as a committee, had agreed to go ahead and compensate them financially as opposed to just the comp time that the juvenile intake system used to have. And like has already been said, it was already planned in their budget to broaden this. Now we're just cleaning up the paperwork.
Thank you for that explanation. Supervisor Anton.
It wasn't entirely clear, maybe I didn't listen carefully. It sounded like we are replacing the comp time with the pay, and if that is correct, or if it isn't, if you could clarify that again for me, because it didn't come across entirely clear in that sense.
Diane, do you want to address that, please?
So, there we go, okay. So for the on-call program, they will receive compensation for any time that they would be responding to a call through pay. They will not receive then comp time in addition. In other areas of their work, they may receive comp time. We're only
Does that
referencing.
clarify it for you? Not completely. Would you like to add?
I think what the Human Services Director is trying to say is that the individuals that are affected by this policy currently are, of course, compensated for the time that they work, but they also have the ability to work and receive comp time for that work. However, when they are in an on-call situation, they will receive pay versus comp time. In the past, they were able to receive the comp time in lieu of pay. That is no longer the case with this change in the policy.
Thank you.
Back here to Supervisor Ritchie.
Why are we doing that? I assume that we, traditionally when businesses say we'll give you comp time, it's because they say I'd rather have you take time off than have to pay out cash. So that's why typically you use comp time. So why are we changing that? What's the difference? Why?
I think for a couple of reasons. One, to be more in line with other counties in the compensation structure for response to this work. And this is separate in work than their regular job, their regular position. This is an addition in which we are responsible to provide this on-call responsibility.
But wasn't our policy before that we had the same thing, but we said we're going to compensate you with comp time instead of cash? That was the policy, right?
So that was the policy through the children, when it was part of the Children's Court Services Department, yes. And again, they were compensated with pay for carrying that phone and then for comp time. And when we did an analysis of how other counties have looked at providing compensation for this service, and also analysis and talking with other counties, the human resources, talked also with their other human resources staff, this was the recommendation for us to be compensating our staff with pay. I can tell you that our staff are very appreciative of this, and in looking at the on-call system, feel that this would be a fair way to be asking them to be providing the service.
Supervisor Conlon.
At the Human Resources Committee, it was presented to us as previously this was handled under one department. Those departments have merged. Previously it was handled by just 2 people. We wanted to expand the pool of people that would be providing these on-call services to provide better service to the community. And this is an attempt to entice the other people to actually do the job. So it's a employee morale thing. We're asking people that previously weren't doing it to do something extra, and it, past practice in the previous department doesn't necessarily apply to the new department and the new people in it. So we thought it was a way to provide a better service community at a fairly minimal cost.
Thank you for that insight from Human Resources as well. Supervisor Wilkie, please.
I assume if they're called out to do the hours, they're gonna be paid at time and a half if it's over 40 hours?
Yeah, so time, no, I have to pause, I'm sorry.
I would hope they would, in fact, to get time and a half, would only be fair if they're gonna work more than 40 hours in a week or 80 hours in a 2-week. They
No,
are
it
gonna get
isn't.
time and a half,
So,
it should be
because
straight
of-
time?
Yeah, they will be paid at the, based upon their time for the provision of the service, and it's looked at as being separate and distinct from their regular hours of work.
They're not paid, are they paid at their hourly rate at straight time?
Yes, that's just for carrying the beeper, for the phone, yeah. They're being paid at their rate of pay for, that as a, service.
So the rate of pay is not their hourly rate?
Yes,
it's
it is their rate of
It's
pay.
a different hourly rate, and it's not at time and a half.
No, it's their rate of pay that they're being compensated at.
Okay. Fair, so if you're on call, everybody gets the same hourly rate?
No, so there are two rates. There is the rate for carrying the phone, which is the
Yeah,
per day, and then there is, if you are called out, you are compensated at your own rate of pay.
Oh, at their own rate of
Correct.
pay, but not at time and a half,
Correct.
if it's over 40. So,
Supervisor Forsyth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Did I hear, I thought I heard Ms. Cable say another advantage of this perhaps was if you get too many people in the past trying to use those comp hours, you may not have the people available that you need for your regular work. You may, I think I heard her say that that was a problem. People cashing in those comp hours can be a problem, whereas if you pay them, you're not running into that situation.
And would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, that can be a challenge, yes, because people would be accruing sometimes comp hours during their regular work time. And certainly we need to help staff to be able to have a balance, a work-life balance, and we work with them on that. But we also have to have a balance of staff to be available.
Thank you. Supervisor Stelgis, please.
Well, I'm still a little bit confused. So, per day stipends that are listed here, that's to compensate people for carrying pager?
The phone, yeah.
And previously, were they getting comp time for that?
No, they were getting compensated for carrying their phone, for being on call. So one person, we're expanding the pool of people to be able to be on call. Right now, we have 2 people to cover on-call for all of Eau Claire County. And we are expanding this. This has been a recommendation during reviews from the Department of Children and Families. And they receive and currently receive compensation for carrying the phone and will continue to receive that compensation. In this change of the ordinance, it changes so that we can compensate people beyond the intake workers to the eligible human services social workers. And then we will be compensating them also for any time that they provide as a service in the on-call program.
Supervisor Chilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is just a point of clarification, and I'm going to probably direct it to the county administrator, and it will not go to the human services director, but just so I'm clear. The fact sheet reads that we're amending the Eau Claire County Human Resources Policy Manual. And my question is this: if we're doing this for human services, just so I'm clear, that in lieu of, the previous policy was if they worked, we gave them comp time, which to my understanding now, as I understand the conversation, is we're going to be paying them. I'm wondering if this new change to the HR is going to apply countywide.
It is my understanding from what I see here that it would be applied countywide, yes.
So other departments moving forward, then our policy will be in lieu of comp time, we will be paying.
That is my understanding.
Okay.
And Supervisor Clark, do you have anything to add to that?
If I am incorrect, do say so, because that is my understanding.
I am confused.
Okay.
I didn't think it did apply countywide, but I may be wrong. In the policy manual, it just applies to that particular policy number. It doesn't apply to the whole thing. But I may be misinterpreting it.
I guess that's what I was looking for clarification on, because it seems to me as I listen to this that we've had a policy and we're moving in a different direction. I'm just wondering if that's the direction we're moving as a county for all departments.
We are definitely not doing away with comp time.
What I'm wondering is if the board is uncomfortable with this.
Well, then I guess I'm going to follow up and say if we're not, as I read it, it's amending the Human Resources Policy Manual. If we're not moving away from this county-wide, I'm wondering what the reasoning would be that it's this narrowly focused to the Human Services Department only that we're considering this change in policy. It seems like it's very pinpoint, and I'm wondering what the reasoning why is.
I think an explanation for that could be given by our Human Services Director to talk about the kinds of services that would be provided by the on-call staff.
So I can speak to that in just a moment. The way the policy, that area of the policy is set up, is that it's narrowly focused currently. So there is an on-call policy specifically for the Sheriff's Department language. There's a section specifically for the Highway Department. And in this section, it was specifically for juvenile intake. So we would not be able to, as we move forward, to be able to compensate the social work staff unless their title was juvenile intake. We will be training all of our social workers, we currently are, in being eligible for juvenile intake, which is the requirement for doing this on-call work. And so this policy needed to be able to be changed in the language so that there could be compensation to the staff. And so as we looked at that, then we reviewed how the staff were being compensated.
Just as a follow-up to that then, my point would be this. I appreciate that, and I heard the sentiment that if this were to pass, that the Human Services employees would be very happy about that. It is my opinion that there are other employees in several other departments that if we move to a policy like this would also be just as happy, as they don't like comp time and would rather get paid. So I'm wondering if instead of a narrow, very fine precision application of this, if a broader look isn't more justified at other departments who have similar situations and have also employees that would also be happy.
Thank you for that comment. And in looking at the discussion and how it has gone here, I am wondering whether or not this is something that needs to go back to the Human Resource Committee. And if so, I do have one more person wishing to speak, and that's Supervisor Spire.
Okay. Going back to what I assume was Supervisor Wilkie's point, my question is this consistent with Wisconsin labor law? Because I'm assuming that these hours that are worked are beyond the 40 hours of the week. Is it consistent with labor law?
So yes, our payroll coordinator supervisor has assessed that and looked at that with the labor law, and to make sure that we are in compliance with that.
Ordinarily, above 40 hours requires extra pay.
Yes.
Supervisor Henning, please.
I'm curious, what control does anybody have over an employee? Now, I'm not insinuating they're bad. They're called out for this instead of comp time, now they're gonna be getting cash. Can they just, at their own will, spend 8 hours out there? Is there a time factor for each job that they have to complete it by? Or how is that controlled?
So the calls for around the on-call program service, this is a requirement for us to be able to be available round the clock 24 hours a day. During working hours, the department responds to the emergencies. And what this program does is it responds when contacted by central dispatch or law enforcement to respond when a child or a juvenile is taken into custody. And so they're having to make decisions, legal decisions, in response to a child or a youth being taken into custody. So all of that is documented in terms of how that's been responded to and then followed up by supervisors and managers. So everything gets recorded in terms of how people are responding. And it wouldn't be, this is not staff deciding, oh, tonight I think I'll work extra hours. That is not the case. This is a very specific type of work that we are required to be responding to as a county.
Supervisor Anton, please.
I would agree with the thought that we ought to take a look at this another time, and include in that, from my perspective at least, the Sheriff Department, Highway Department, any others, so that we would have not a targeted point, but rather a county-wide point of view, because Administrator Schraub suggested, and perhaps this is exactly the way it is, but not all of us fully understand that, and certainly didn't come up in the Highway Department as far as I know.
Supervisor Dunning, please.
In response to Supervisor Chilson's comments about whether it should be spread to other departments, I think we need to be aware that if it does spread to other departments, it may require a budget amendment, because this department had that into their budget. Any other departments would require a change to the budget, in which case that would have to come back as a financial, as a budget increase.
Thank you for that comment. And I think our county administrator wishes to clarify some comments that she made.
Thank you. To Supervisor Chilson, very specific question. I did answer that incorrectly. Our Corporation Counsel has brought the actual policy document up. And in the section, and I believe that you might be referring to the Highway Department particularly, and they currently do receive pay, and they are compensated at a rate for their on-call at $40 per day. And that is for the roles of patrol superintendent, shop superintendent, or highway supervisors, who are the lead on-call supervisors for weekends.
Supervisor Ritchie?
Well, I'm still not clear on the highway department, just as an easy example. It sounds like you're saying that's their rate for carrying a phone. Is that what you're saying? Because if they get called out in the middle of the night for a snowstorm, are they getting compensated with comp time or pay right now? Because they're going to be screaming bloody murder about why are human services people getting this sweet deal and we're not. And if this goes county-wide, what's that going to do to the county budget?
Well, and what we have actually for the Highway Department is there are 3 separate sections to this. One specifically relating to the patrol superintendent, shop superintendent, and highway supervisors, which will be the lead on-call supervisor. They're the folks that are the leads for that on Saturdays and Sundays, and they are compensated at a rate of $40 per day. when highway employees and highway supervisors are working their 4-day-per-week schedule, the working office staff handle the Friday calls with the on-call supervisor, who is also paid $40 for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then when an incident occurs requiring the on-call supervisor to leave home, drive to a site to inspect the situation, and then determine that additional staff are required to be called in, the supervisor will be paid straight time overtime. So it lists out those instances. However, the highway employees who would respond in the event of a snowstorm, that wouldn't be considered on-call pay per se. Yes, you should.
What would it be?
One moment, the Corporation Council has clarification as well.
I'll just speak up.
And you are.
I've been sitting here listening to the conversation, and I've read this before I came here tonight, and I did pull up policy 521 in the human resources policy. And when I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at the language of the fact sheet here, and I think really where this comes about is if you read the language, it says the requested change will impact eligible staff in the human services department. It doesn't say department, but I think it should probably say that there. I think what's going on here, when I look at 521, it talks about on-call pay for different departments. There's a provision in here for highway department, there's a provision in here for the facilities, there's a provision in here for juvenile intake workers, Coon Fork Park Ranger, the Lake Altoona Park Ranger, airport maintenance employees. There isn't any there for human services workers. And so I think what this is doing is adding language to policy 521 that allows on-call pay for eligible human services staff. And that comes about because primarily they were not working in an on-call basis doing juvenile intake duties, whereas now they're doing that. Is that correct? So I think that's what the intent of this is. But that's my supposition.
Is that a clarification that makes it easier to understand?
Not really, I'm still confused, but doesn't this eventually lead to everybody I mean, they're all gonna come in one at a time and say we want the same deal if we don't have it?
I think basically, as he said, this is really just for cases of on-call. Go back to our Director of Human Services, Diane Cable.
So one of the pieces that sometimes can be confusing is when you think about on-call and then you think about when people have to work more hours in a day. And those are two separate and distinct components. When you have to think about having somebody designated to be on call after hours, which would be different than having to work more hours. And so we're really talking only about that on-call piece.
Thank you. Supervisor Conlon?
Personally, I think we're on?
Should be on.
I think we're straying afield. At this point, we seem to have a little bit of an issue with human services, trying to get more people to provide on-call services so it doesn't rely on just two individuals. And they've merged the departments so they have the opportunity to do this, provide better service to the community and less stress on the people that are providing the on-call services. Whether or not it doesn't appear that it's affecting the rest of the county seems to be working fine with their current on-call status, but if it isn't, I would think that perhaps the Human Resources Committee could review the total on-call policy county-wide if that's what we wish to do, but right now we seem to have an issue with the Human Services Department at this immediate time, and I would hope that we would either vote this up or down as it is, and then maybe, if we wish to, direct Human Resources and Administration to review the total on-call policy to make sure it makes sense as a general rule. Thank you.
Supervisor Jolson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My point tonight was not to dispute the on-call pay per day. My point was to dispute the policy that we're setting with one department where people, instead of getting comp time, are now gonna get paid. And there are employees in other departments that would like to do the same. An example from our highway meeting, it was probably 2 years ago, the employees came in to explain to the committee comp time. And I realize we're not talking about highway, but we are talking about how we're handling this. And their explanation to us is if they worked their 40 hours a week, and they had worked their 40, and the call came in on Christmas Eve that they needed to go and plow snow, they would come into work, and in lieu of getting paid, they would get a day off in the upcoming week, like Wednesday. So what we're asking them to do is to leave their family on the holiday to get a comp day later on. My point in making this point is, I think before we jump off the bridge and set a very specific policy for one, it would seem to me that a review of all departments to determine if that is the policy we're really after would be in order. Because to set it for one and not for others doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I guess at this point, I'd like to make a motion to refer it back to the HR committee and to the administration so that it can be studied more and bring something more comprehensive forth.
The motion by Supervisor Chilson has been seconded by Supervisor Leary. Is there further discussion on the motion of referral?
Yes.
So basically at this point, please take your, oh, I'm sorry, Supervisor Dunning.
I think by,
I don't think it's debatable to refer. If it's a motion to refer, it's not debatable.
Oh, excuse me, I thought that was only for tabling. Thank you. Already, so apparently Supervisor Dunning, I can't recognize you as this is not a debatable issue. So you'll take your keypads then and vote as to whether or not you wish to refer this back to the Human Resources Committee. And Supervisor Steinhauer, I'm missing your vote. Thank you, and that is passed on a vote of 17 to, nine. And so this will be referred back to the Human Resource Committee. And so we'll move on to the next file, which is 1718-084.
To abolish 1.73 FTE Administrative Specialist 2 position and increase 1.73 FTE Administrative Specialist 2 position to a .80 FTE.
And Supervisor Clark, an explanation, please. Oh, I need a motion first. Supervisor Forsyth and a second by Supervisor Conlon. Now, an explanation by Supervisor
Thank you,
Conlon.
ma'am. Highway, now Steve's got me thinking highway. Human Resources Committee received and approved a request from the UW Extension Office to abolish one FTE, a .73 FTE Administration Specialist 2 position, which is currently vacant, and to add an increase to the FTE of the current Administrative Specialist 2 position from .73 to .80. This will result in an approximate savings of $9,461.07. Making it very simple, this isn't going to cost us anything. In fact, we're going to get some money. So I urge your support.
Is there any discussion in regard to this motion? Not seeing any, please take your keypads and vote. And Supervisor Catlin, please. Thank you. That is passed unanimously. We'll go on to file 072.
Amending the 1982 official zoning district boundary map for the town of Clear Creek.
A motion by Supervisor Lavelle, seconded by Supervisor Hennig. An explanation by Supervisor Gibbs. There we go. Should be on.
All right. This is to rezone 15.16 acres from A3 to the A2 agriculture district to allow the sale of the home and surrounding acreage. The remaining 20 acres may be sold at some point in the future. This was reviewed by the town of Clear Creek, and they recommended approval. Oakland County Planning and Development, it fits all the zoning codes and regulations, and they recommended approval. It was reviewed by Planning and Development, and it fits with the Oakland County's comprehensive plan, so we voted to recommend approval.
Thank you for that explanation. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, please take your keypads and vote on the amendment to the official zoning district bound. Supervisor Leary, please. And apparently she isn't here at this point in time. And she's running in. And Supervisor Leary, would you vote, please? And that motion passes unanimously. And on to file 088.
Amending the 1982 official zoning district boundary map for the town of Clear Creek.
And a motion by Supervisor Beckfield, seconded by Supervisor Dunning. An explanation by Supervisor Gibson.
Chairman, this is very similar to the one we just approved. This one is to rezone 5 acres of land from APA agriculture to A2 district to allow the sale of an existing home that's on that acreage. This also was reviewed by the town of Clear Creek, and they recommended approval. It was reviewed by Planning and Development, meets all the zoning codes, and was brought to Planning and Development Committee, and we recommended approval.
Thank you for that explanation. Are there any questions or discussion? Supervisor Smiler.
This is for my own instruction. My understanding is that the zoning maps have as their principal purpose in this case to preserve the agricultural land. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And the petition is to change that so that a residence can be built there?
No.
No.
No. There's already a resident home there, and it's breaking that section off, and actually A2 is a form of agriculture zoning, and it still allows them to sell that home.
So it doesn't decrease the agricultural land? Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions, so I would ask that you take your keypad and vote on this issue. And that motion passes unanimously. And so we will go to file 077.
Adopting the Lake Altoona County Park Master Park Plan, supporting implementation of the plan as time and funding allow.
Motion, please. By Supervisor Leary, seconded by Supervisor Forsyth, and an explanation by Chair of Parks and Forests, Supervisor Pat Lavelle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Peterson gave a presentation on this in the October meeting, and this is a resolution brought back by the committee. We have been working on this since 2015. And what this is a plan. It doesn't say how long it's going to take to implement it. I know there's no money budgeted for it in 2018. But what this gives us, where we can start working on matching grants or matching funds and grants for it. As you know, I'm familiar with the park. The only thing that's really updated in the last 20 years is the clubhouse and boat landings and the parking lot on that side. Other than that, septic system 50 plus years old. The parking lot on the beach side is probably older than that. And the restrooms and the changing room have all been there for 40 or 50 years. So the parks are getting old. So the committee sat down and drew up a plan on what this is to give us a chance to start moving on this. So I'd appreciate if the board would approve this. So like I said, it probably would take quite a few years to get it all done, but it's at least a start. Thank you.
Thank you for that explanation. Supervisor DeLuca.
Thank you. At the meeting that this was presented, I think Supervisor Estelle just brought up concern of the pavilion being right close to the waterfront and with a question whether it met the DNR recommendations of setback from the waterfront. Have they addressed that? Are there changes going to be made to the master plan, or is it as is?
Well, I don't think we're going to put a pavilion or a building where without the setback that the DNR requires. If I have my way, I think the building will stay there. The building we're talking about and that was built back in the 30s, and it's a nice old building, and I think we get it updated, and it's far enough away from the lake right now. But whatever happens over time, it'll be within the guidelines of the DNR.
Supervisor Leary, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to address a little bit, we've got a watershed planning committee that's been doing a lot of work on water vitality, and I think this plan meshes very well with a lot of those issues and addresses some of the concerns, like with the sewage and so on. The other thing is we're looking at being an attractive community where we can have workers that want to live here and move here, people with families, and I think this is an important economic development factor that we can overlook very easily when you think of a park as just a park and something fun. But it's a big quality of life issue. Now, I had a concern that this is such a large budget item, I don't think we can do this very quickly, but if we have a plan, we can do it in, I think, steps that are accomplished that we can afford. So I just think it's a nice idea to get the plan going, and as Supervisor Lavelle mentioned, there's going to be some things we'll have to address. And I know land conservation has a few other issues we'd like to, have some input in as well. But I think overall it's a really worthwhile plan, and I hope you support it.
Thank you for those comments. Supervisor Dunning.
Well, I think we should be reminded that this plan is not cast in stone as far as the actual designs are concerned. So as it proceeds, there may be movement of buildings and parking lots in different areas a little bit, but this gives the approval for the dollars, or at least a package, and I think we should go forward with it, and as the plans go forward, they will take into consideration the various departments that do have some concerns about it or do have some input. So I think we should vote for it and get it moving.
Supervisor Forsythe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Supervisor Dunning pretty much just said what I was going to say. As I understand it, we're not approving something that would be carved in stone by any means. This is a pretty fluid concept in terms of improving the park and the sort of things they want to see offered there in the future, the sort of things that would attract people to it, and the kind of venues that might be possible. But by no means are we exactly approving what we saw on the screen that night, but rather more of a fluid concept of improving the park.
Thank you. Supervisor Anton, please.
Pretty much covered the point of we'll work it out as we go. However, my real question is, have we considered sufficient input so that as we're going forward, we're picking up those things that need attention? For example, the point of a building being close to the water wasn't mentioned, but it's obviously an inconsistency with the Department of Natural Resources, maybe some other areas as well. I'm simply throwing down a challenge to us. Have we looked at this sufficiently carefully so that we're not going ahead and then, oops, we should have considered something else, and we addressed it with all of the people that needed to be given an opportunity to speak to it.
Supervisor Lavelle, would you like to address that, please?
This plan can be amended at any time. It's, like I said, this is gonna be a long-term plan. What it is when we start applying for grants and matching funds, first thing they ask is, what is it in your master plan, or what do you have a master plan? If we don't have a master plan, we don't move ahead. So this isn't going to be something that's going to take place overnight. But I like to get it started. You see what happened out to Tower Ridge when we had a plan and how it went with matching funds and everything, how that turned out. Another thing I'd like to Supervisor Leary, the head of the dermatology at Mayo here, said one of the reasons he stayed in Eau Claire, he could have moved to different places, is because of the park system. And I felt pretty good about that. It's the first time ever, a doctor said to me that, him and his wife, they live over in Altoona, they love the parks, all cross-country skiing and everything else, so I felt pretty good about that.
Thank you. Supervisor Henning.
I'd like to commend the Parks and Forest Committee for all the work that they've done on this, and they've come up, I think, with a very unique plan. This is a unique piece of property. They don't make land anymore. You can't buy it. And we've got to make the best use out of what we've got here. And this is a great opportunity, and it's going to take a long time, but it's going to reward a lot of people. And a lot of people use that park, and I think that we need to improve this.
Supervisor Gibson, please.
Yeah, just to reiterate some of the things and some of the questions that came up. Over the last 2 years, I mean, yes, the Parks and Forest Department put a lot of time into this, but we had several public hearings. I mean, this plan is, a lot of it changed significantly over the last couple of years based on public input from those hearings. So, I mean, I feel really comfortable that, with the amount of public that was involved in all of this, we've got something that we can work from. The other thing is, I think the Supervisor Leary brought up about doing it at different time periods. Well, part of this plan, if anybody remembers, is based on different phases too over time. So in order to get grants and a lot of things, like Supervisor Lavelle said, I mean, we have to have a plan in place, otherwise they're not going to do anything.
Supervisor Stoneges, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment, Supervisor DeLuca, I guess, said that I had expressed some reservations about a location of a building. I don't recall that. I've been a strong supporter of this plan, so I don't have any of those reservations for what it's worth. I do, again, believe that we can work anything out given enough time and working with the specific authorities. And I also want to echo what Supervisor Gibson said. We have had a lot of input on this, multiple sessions, with listening sessions, with public open groups. We've met with a number of neighbors who have expressed concerns. We met with some of the interest groups down there, including Ski Sprites and others. And so I think it is well vetted and a great start. And this was all triggered by an initial planned capital project 2 or 3 years ago, where we're going to start doing some parking lot work. And we said, wait a minute, why would we do several $100,000 worth of parking lot work unless we're sure that this is where we actually want the parking lot long-term? So this is kind of the culmination of that, which will allow us again to start making sequential capital improvements. So I strongly support this and ask for everyone else to do so as well.
Thank you. Supervisor DeLuca.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that the plan isn't just anchored in stone. I was just worried about that if there were any changes, that it was more flexible. And I truly understand matching grants and having to have a master plan to be able to move forward. We experienced that with Beaver Creek, and I understand, and I'm for the project. I just have one other question. Does this increase our exposure for the dredging aspect that goes on at the lake? Is the county more accountable, or would that be something that would arise from us having more buildings on the parkland?
Supervisor Bell, would you like to speak to that?
No, this would have nothing to do with the dredging. It would have nothing. The dredging part of whether
Okay, thank you.
That would come through the Lake District. Supervisor Smile.
Madam Chairperson. Madam Chairperson, I request that the question be called.
I don't have anyone further on my screen that's wishing to speak to this issue, so it looks like we're at that time. So please take your keypads and vote your preference on this issue. And that particular resolution passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Now we'll go on to the reports of standing committees, commissions, and second readings, and file 82.
To reapply for a Class B intoxicating liquor license for use at the restaurant and lounge at the Chippewa Valley Regional Airport under Section Wisconsin Statute 125.51 5B2.
Because our rep on the airport commission is not here this evening, I've asked our corporate counsel here to give us some information in regard to this particular file. Oh, excuse me, before we do that, we need a motion. We'll look for a motion, and Supervisor Buchanan, Supervisor Chilson as a second. And now the explanation.
Thank you. Essentially, this is an annual resolution that's put before the board. The county, because it owns the airport, under the laws as indicated under Wisconsin statutes 125.51, can run or apply for a Class B liquor license. What this does is essentially requires the concessionaire, the Hangar 54 business that's out at the airport, to apply for the liquor license through the state and also through the city of Eau Claire. Basically, it's done because the county is the owner of the building, the business that's out there is our concessionaire. We have to approve it and then also direct them to make the application for it.
Thank you for that explanation. I'm not seeing anyone wishing to address this further, and so please take your keypads to register your vote. Supervisor Laird? Good, thank you. And that passes unanimously. The last item on our agenda this evening is an appointment needing the approval of the county board. The appointment of Sergeant John Stapler as County Safety Coordinator on Traffic Safety Committee. Commission. Supervisor Denny, approve, a motion and a second by Supervisor Cron. I'm not seeing any further discussion on this item, so please register your vote on your keypad.
Nice bridge.
And that the appointment is confirmed unanimously. That accomplishes our agenda for this evening. Thank you for your attendance and your participation.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and Eau Claire County. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.